It's been a long time since I've tested a 5K monitor, but the Philips Brilliance 27E3U7903 indeed has got that fabled 5K resolution with that 27-inch form factor, giving it very high pixel density. It also has got a flat, glossy IPS panel with a quoted contrast ratio of a whopping 2000 to 1. Better still, you've got Display HDR 600 certification, it's Calman Ready with it hitting the sRGB, Adobe RGB, Display P3 and DCI P3 color gamuts, and it also has got Thunderbolt 4 in and out connectivity, a SmartKVM feature, and also a built-in webcam with auto-framing technology and also a microphone. Now all of this can be found for roughly £850, at least at the time of filming and in the UK. And in this video, which has been sponsored by the manufacturer, I'll be covering everything you need to know about it so you can make your own informed purchasing decision. So jumping straight in, let's talk about its overall color accuracy. And yes, through the monitor's OSD, you've got a Display P3, DCI P3, DCI P3 D50, sRGB, Adobe RGB, Adobe RGB D50, Rec 2020 and Rec 709 modes to choose from, at least in SDR. In HDR, you've also got the DCI P3 and Rec 2020 color spacers. Now concentrating in SDR and the sRGB mode, which has also got full brightness controls, you'll be able to see that the gamut coverage sits at 96% with the gamut volume sitting at 98.1%. Below you can see how it compares to the standard. The average delta E sits at a pretty impressive 1.25 and a maximum of 2.62. Note these figures that I'm going to be sharing with you are all uncalibrated and out the box. Indeed, it has been actually calibrated from the factory, not myself. Now the tested contrast ratio sits at a whopping 1916 to 1, with a measured white point in comparison to the 6504 Kelvin target at 6168 Kelvin at 100%. In terms of the gamut curve, you can see how it compares to the 2.2 standard. Now switching over to the Adobe RGB mode via the monitor's OSD, you can see here that the gamut coverage and the gamut volumes have been positively affected. And yes, indeed, it's actually aiming at the Adobe RGB color gamut with a 98.1 and 99.8% coverage respectively. Below you can see again how it compares to the standard. The average delta E sits at just 0.97 and a maximum of 2.84. Tested contrast ratio doesn't change, and the measured white point gets even closer at 6438 Kelvin at 100%. Again, you can see how it compares to the Gamma 2.2 standard. Now moving on, we get to the Display P3 standard, which will be of interest to Apple users. Here you can see how the gamut coverage and volumes have been affected across the board, and below how it compares to the Display P3 standard. The average delta E sits at 0.76 and a maximum of 2.77. The measured white point is almost bang on at 6585 Kelvin at 100%. In terms of the gamma curve, yet again, you can see how it compares to the 2.2 standard. Now moving on, we get on to the DCI P3 mode, and here you can see that the gamut coverage sits at 99.4% and the gamut volume goes to 108.5%. Below you can see again how it compares to the standard. The average delta E sits at just 1.17 and a maximum of 2.33. And it is also worth considering over here that the measured white point is indeed a little bit tighter at 6548 Kelvin at 100%, and the gamut curve is now hitting towards the 2.6 standard, which is indeed required for this color space. So moving swiftly on, we get on to brightness, and here in HDR I clocked in a peak of 954 nits, indeed far surpassing the Display HDR 600 certification. In fact, even in SDR I clocked in 648 nits, meaning that it's plenty bright even in a very bright room. As for minimum brightness, it gets all the way down to 43 nits, showing good sort of range. Speaking of which, this brings me on to brightness uniformity. And with the Smart Uniformity disabled, you can see how this monitor performs across the board. And now you'll be able to see the results with it enabled. So yes, it does have a positive effect, and it might be something that you want to use, specifically if you do not want to have any sort of fluctuations. Now in terms of the overall backlight bleed, these images were taken in a completely pitch black environment, but you can indeed see that there is a glossy panel, which therefore made it a little bit hard to capture. It's worth noting over here that these images were also taken in SDR with the brightness ramped up. Now the reason I mention this is because the monitor has got local dimming, although this will only be present if you have an HDR signal. And indeed over here, through the monitor's OSD with HDR enabled, you'll be able to notice the local dimming option with off, weak, medium and strong. And as the higher you go, you'll be able to have an even darker image, which will be very handy specifically if you're editing in an HDR, and coupling that with its glossy panel, it means that you're going to get really deeper blacks. Now it's also nice to see that you have got a few different HDR modes that you can select via the monitor's OSD. The one I'd actually suggest is the display HDR 600 because indeed it meets the VESA standard. But you can go for HLG, Vivid, Movie and also Personal, and you can also fully disable it if you so wish. In terms of the color modes, you've also got Rec 2020 which is suggested and also DCI-P3. Aside from that, I would like to have a quick word about text legibility, and the camera won't do it any sort of justice. But indeed in person, that 5K resolution with that 27-inch form factor gives you a very high pixel density of 218. Indeed everything looks ultra clear, and it's also very handy for productivity's sake because you can multitask a little bit better. I would also like to emphasize that you have got a very glossy IPS panel, which indeed aids its overall color accuracy and indeed boosts its overall contrast ratio. But it's just some food for thought if you have got a bright sunlit room, or for example a window positioned just behind you, which is never quite recommended but sometimes unavoidable. Here you will be able to see quite a lot of reflections and glare. Moving on, we get on to build quality, and here you've got rounded edges on this 27-inch monitor. You've also got bezels that go all the way around, including towards the bottom, which is a little bit thicker. There is a power LED, which can also be customized in terms of brightness or indeed fully disabled. Now the stand itself is one of the sleekest ones I've ever come across, not only because its overall form factor is relatively small, therefore not taking up too much space on your desk, but it also provides you full ergonomic controls in height, tilt and also pivot adjustments. Indeed it can be rotated both ways, although it's worth noting over here that it cannot be swiveled. If that's something that you're looking forward to, then you can replace the built-in stand with the VESA bracket that's provided within the box, and they're allowing you to place it on a multi-monitor setup or a monitor arm. Moving on, we get onto connectivity, and here you've got an HDMI 2.1 port and a Thunderbolt 4 port, which will support data, video, and also a power delivery of up to 96 watts. Then you've also got an Ethernet port which will support up to 1 gigabit, which can be quite handy because you can plug in an RJ45 port and then also feed through data to a laptop, which for example only has a USB Type-C port, handy for example in an office scenario. Then in terms of the other Thunderbolt port, it will support up to 15 watts of power delivery, video and also data, therefore also allowing you to daisy chain this monitor with another one. Then you have got a USB hub which is initiated by using the USB Type-C port which is labeled up, and this will also transfer data and up to 15 watts of power, and therefore will give you access to the two USB Type-A Gen 2 ports and also the singular USB Type-C port which will dispatch data and also 15 watts of power. Now these ports are actually quite important because you have got a built-in SmartKVM switch. For those people who are not aware what a KVM switch actually does and operates, I've actually got some greater detail about this on my dedicated video that you can find out upon your pop-up banner or following the links down in the description below. In a nutshell, it means you can plug in your keyboard and mouse directly into the monitor, then have the monitor connected up to a desktop computer and also simultaneously a laptop, and then over here you can effectively triple tap on the control button on your keyboard for you to switch between the two different sources, therefore allowing you to have your peripherals constantly in use rather than having to unplug and replug them every single time. On that note, I would just like to point out that you've got something called Philips Multiview, which effectively allows you to have two different source inputs displaying at the very same time on the monitor. Quite handy if you've got a complex workflow. Furthermore, this brings me on to the monitor's OSD, which can be accessed through a set of soft touch physical buttons that are found at the bottom right hand side of the monitor. The monitor's OSD itself is very comprehensively laid out and provides you all the right options that you'll require for you to tinker around with the image. Elsewhere, you've also got the Philips Smart Control software, which gives you a degree of certain customization and also the ability to check for latest firmware updates. So you might have also noticed that through the monitor settings there is an audio tab, and yes indeed the monitor can route through audio directly through the monitor, be it in terms of outputting it via the 3.5mm jack that's found at the back, or indeed via the built-in speakers where you've got two 5-watt speakers. They'll suffice for basic music listening or indeed notifications, or of course if you're going to be taking any sort of video calls. Now aside from this, you've also got an AI-powered 5-megapixel webcam, which also supports Windows Hello, making it quite easy to access your device, at least if you just want to use your biometric face data. Now everything you can see and hear right now is coming directly from the webcam, which is positioned over the monitor. And it also has got something called auto framing. Now this will only be enabled if you were to downscale the camera, be it in terms of still or video, to roughly 1080p down from 1440p, and that's exactly what you can see right now. Now auto framing effectively does what it says on the tin. So if I were to go back, the camera will try and adjust it to make sure I am still in frame, and equally if I were to come forwards, again it tries to do that job automatically. You can even stand up to a certain degree and it'll try and go up as much as possible and then also go down in order to try and get my face. So I think it's actually quite a fun feature to say the least, and you can also interact with it. Now if I were to hold up the peace sign, it will zoom, and you can see it right now written at the bottom. It's zooming out, and if I want to zoom in, I can hold the one, kind of like a 1 symbol, but I found I have to hold it this way round rather than the other way round, and yes, it zooms in all the way to level 9, so 9 times zoom, but let's get away from that because it is quite in your face, and yes, it'll work even if you're going backwards, so that's pretty cool. Now if you do not want the auto framing feature to be enabled, you can also hold your fist, and then you'll have a little notification that says it's auto framing off. So right now it's no longer doing that, so you can see if I go backwards and forwards, and if I hold the palm, it will re-enable auto framing, and yes, as you can see right now, it's going to try and frame it again. So this can be a really useful feature if you're going to be taking calls and you always want to be in frame, and you can also have it for single and group, so it can be quite handy if you're in a team as well. So a really nice little feature with the webcam, and something I've never come across before, specifically with a built-in webcam feature on a monitor. Now to conclude, you've got something called Power Sensor 2, which effectively tries to reduce the energy consumption by detecting when a user moves closer or further away from the screen. Although for this to properly operate, you'll need to be running on Windows 11, which I'm not currently on. So there we have it. Hopefully this detailed video has provided you all the information that you need on this monitor, and I'll be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below. If you do find this video helpful, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Totally Dubbed, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.